actually hosting this WebEx for us. And today we have Mitch Marmon with Delta Consultants. He is going to be our moderator this morning. He is also the Executive Vice President of SCIA, and we have as our guest speaker, Colonel Murphy. I do want to go over just a couple of things with you. We should have everybody muted for the webinar. Please, if you have any questions, use the chat feature. That's at the bottom of your screen. If you hover over the bottom of your screen with your mouse, you'll see a little chat icon. Please feel free to type any questions there. Colonel Murphy will be taking questions at the end of the presentation. He has some great slides that he'll go over. And again, if you are not on mute, please mute yourself, but you should be on mute. And we will have participants joining us while we're going over the presentation, but I do want to ask everyone to please feel free to use that chat feature at the bottom of the screen. And Mitch, I'll go ahead and turn it over to you, and please let us know if you need anything on our end.
All right, does everybody hear me? Thank you, Christy. Thank you, Deanna, for hosting this for us, and thank you, Colonel Murphy, for doing this. It's we're used to gathering together to be with each other, and having this done in front of a large audience. But we're doing everything we can with COVID to try to keep these monthly sessions open, and so far they've worked well. And believe me, I'm the most technologically impaired person in the world, so I'm working through it too. But let's get to it. I'll introduce Colonel Murphy. I'm gonna go ahead and give you his short abbreviated bio because I can't read 3 pages fast enough to get it to you guys. So we'll get right into it. Colonel Murphy serves as the 64th Commander of the New Orleans District. His career began in 1997 when he received his commission as an engineer officer from the Illinois Institute of Technology. For the last 22 years, he has served at all echelons within the Army, to include assignments with Armored, Stryker, Airborne, and Special Operations units, as well as the interagency in Washington, D.C. No stranger to the Corps, Colonel Murphy commanded the Nashville District from 2015 to 2017, where he delivered a civil works program estimated at $290 million annually. His focus was navigation, hydropower, and flood risk management. He is deployed to combat for 4 times in both Iraq and Afghanistan, as well as peacekeeping operations in the Balkans. Within the United States, he has participated in humanitarian assistance missions to include fighting forest fires in Montana and providing hurricane relief in New Orleans following Hurricane Katrina. He comes to New Orleans from Carlisle, Pennsylvania, where he graduated from U.S. Army War College. Colonel Murphy holds a Bachelor's of Science in Civil Engineering from the Illinois Institute of Technology, a Master's of Science in Civil Engineering from Missouri University of Science and Technology, and a Master of Arts in Strategy from the Army War College. I guess it's these civil engineering degrees is why I trust him the most. Colonel Murphy has earned the Ranger Tab, the Sapper Tab, the Master Parachutist Badge, and he is a recipient of the Army Engineer Association Bronze DeFleury Medal. He's a native of Greenville, South Carolina. He is happily married to the former Nicole Lydia, also from South Carolina, and they have 2 children, Will and Claire. Colonel Murphy, thank you, and we so look forward to your discussion as it relates to our area and your mission in New Orleans.
All right, thank you. Mitch, can you hear me?
Hear you great. We hear you fine.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. You tell me when it's up, and we'll get started. So how do you have it?
So you just need to expand it, and it'll be fine. We're on your title page. but we can see your computer Explorer screen as well.
Okay, how's that?
Same. There. That's better. But your notes are still on the side. And look, we're going to take this informal. I mean, this is not to, there you go. That's perfect.
All right. So we'll get started. Thank you for the bio. That's always awkward to hear your life read before you, but it really is exciting to be here with you. I really just want to give you an overview on what we're seeing here in the Corps of Engineers, but from a regional and national perspective, and then just hit some highlights on the projects. But I really want to give you an overview for what is going on with the district, and especially in a COVID-19 environment. So much like all of you, we've been operating at the district in a COVID-19 environment for 20 weeks now. So it's hard to believe it's been 5 months, but what that means is 5 months at really a mass telework footing for the majority of my 1,074 employees. While field and project personnel are still going to work, to projects, to construction sites, all of my office personnel pretty much are mass teleworking with the, I've made it optional if they want to come in the building. So really what we're doing now has become the new normal, and not just for the district, but really what I'm seeing throughout the federal government. Skype for Business, WebEx, and actually this month, the Corps of Engineers is going to start transitioning to Microsoft Teams. So what we're doing now has really become the new norm. And, you know, folks want to come in and meet with me, much like in months past, like, hey, I want to come in and talk Morganza to the Gulf, or I want to do this. This is the new meeting on project topics, because I've closed my headquarters off for any outside visitors. So I share that with you because some folks don't really they wouldn't know, because, you know, we're also relatively isolated how things are operating. But really, that's what the federal government and certainly the Corps are looking at for the foreseeable future, is this virtual environment. Like the SAME, the Society of American Military Engineers Small Business Conference, that's scheduled in November every year. And every year, all 43 district commanders come, all the general officers in the Corps come. Well, that's in November, and that's already been changed, at least for the Corps venue, into a virtual event. So we're looking at this from a Corps, from an Army, and really a lot of this on the federal side being virtual for quite some time now. Now, I can't tell you what's going on in November, but I can tell you that right now, looking forward, it does seem like on the Corps and the federal side, or the Army side, will be virtual for quite some time. So for the agenda, I just want to give you an overview, you know, what's going on in the district. You know, what are we seeing? Many of you have seen some of this, so my intent was not to regurgitate slides you've seen in the past, but really tell you things you might not know. Then we'll hit flood risk management, and really that's focusing, you know, what's going on in the last 2 years, and especially this last year with the flood fight, with the tropical storm season. And then I'm just going to hit wave tops on these projects. And I've got Durand Elzy, Durand's deputy, here to help me if there's any questions at the end that are, you know, deeper dives on details I don't have. But then we'll really quick hit the Bipartisan Budget Act of 2018. I'll hit some regulatory, and then I'll hit right at the end just some changes in USACE, because a lot of you are engaged or know about changes going on in DC, but there's some significant changes going on at the Corps headquarters as well. So without further ado, we'll jump into the New Orleans district. So I wanted to give you an idea of really how the district fits regionally and nationally into the USACE enterprise. And some of you might say, well, we kind of get the New Orleans district. But for those of you who don't, one of the things I did at the War College prior to coming here was you write a lot of papers. And I chose to write a paper on the strategic environment that is South Louisiana and, you know, the Corps' mission and how it supports it. And it was an eye-opening exercise for me on just the strategic significance nationally here in South Louisiana. It's not just a Louisiana thing. Hey, it's important to Louisiana. It really is important to the nation. And really what the Corps does, supporting the strategic assets down here is a massive role. And we'll really get that in the slide. But if you look at this slide on the graphic on the left side, you can kind of see primarily the Mississippi River. And the Corps of Engineers, it's 8 continental U.S. divisions our boundaries are watershed boundaries. They're not political boundaries. They're not state boundaries. The Corps' boundaries are based on watersheds. And from a military standpoint, the Mississippi Valley Division, which runs from Canada on down to here, it's 6 districts, all led by full-board colonels, is based on the Mississippi watershed. And that's a big deal that I pass along to you from the, we have the rules of war that they teach us in the Army. And one of those is unity of command. So for the entire Mississippi, from where it starts in the north all the way down to where it empties in the Gulf, you have one 2-star general who commands every Corps district that borders the Mississippi River. And that's huge for us because you have a single management system guiding how the river operates up and down its length. There's 6 districts, like I said. You can see us. We're right here in the south in red. But one of the things I'd pass along to you is you work with the New Orleans district. One thing that's very significant and has a lot of sway, and I know some of you visit Washington, D.C. as you lobby for your projects, but we have the largest civil works program in the Valley. So in all 6 of these districts up and down, New Orleans district has the largest civil works program, not just in the Valley, but in the Corps. And that's significant because it means there's a lot of attention that the district gets, not just regionally, but nationally as well. Also very important to many of you is our dredging program. It's the largest dredging program in the Corps. We use by far more dredges here in South Louisiana than any other state. And then a lot of times the joke is, what's the sucking sound? That sucking sound is New Orleans district using up a lot of the assets, especially on the dredging side of the house. And then given the strategic importance of all the commerce, all the energy, everything that goes on here in South Louisiana, we have one of the largest regulatory programs. And this is a source of constant frustration and consternation, to be candid, in a lot of my engagements with folks, because a lot of the phone calls I get are frustrations on the regulatory side of the house. We can't move quick enough or fast enough. And I'll get at the end, and I think there's ways that you can help us with this. But given all that we do down here, you can see our 3 primary missions. I don't think this is a surprise to anybody, but flood risk management, navigation, and coastal protection, and ecosystem restoration. And all those enable significant investment and risk reduction here in South Louisiana. So how do we do it? It's the money. And I think a lot of folks look at this slide and they ask the question, especially when they see the president's budget released and they see a big fat goose egg, or they don't see what they expected, there's a disappointment. And one of the things as you look at this pie chart and you look at these numbers, one of the things I'd ask you to remember is just that there are more than one source of funding that we operate out of. We have the president's budget, and what we've seen in the last few years is that we receive much more in the work plan than we do in the president's budget. So if president budget comes out and you're HNC and you don't see what you expect, don't lose complete heart. There are opportunities to engage via supplementals and the work plan. And really, if you look at the FY20, the yellow box in the middle left of the screen, president's budget that New Orleans district received this year, $237 million, and we received almost twice that, $396 million from Congress via the work plan. So there's a lot of opportunity for you to engage your congressional members to influence what we get. And you can see that we have a very, very healthy budget. Just this fiscal year, $634 million. We have a total program of $3.4 billion. That includes HISDRs, that includes BB-18 and carryover funds to include this year. But what that means is a lot of opportunity. I don't know if any of you were able to participate. We just did a virtual industry day, our first one ever in this new COVID-19 environment. We can't do face-to-face right now. And just listening to it, it's amazing the amount of opportunity out there. And I got feedback that was like, hey, that was a breath of fresh air as the economy is struggling, to hear that the Corps, specifically here in the New Orleans district, that we have as much work as we do. So where does all the money go? And to me, this is, district commanders like to say they have money slides. Really, what I want you to look at this, it's a busy slide. But what we did here to really demonstrate, hey, what value does the Corps of Engineers, does the New Orleans district bring to South Louisiana, and why does it matter? As we were briefing the chief of engineers when he came down here, this is the slide we developed. And really, this is focused on, hey, what are our FRM projects, our flood risk management projects and studies? This isn't everything. This is just flood risk management projects and studies here in South Louisiana. And everyone knows the facts. Louisiana is the #1 export state in the nation. We're the #4 oil producer in the nation. Louisiana contains the most active foreign trade zone in the United States. We have Louisiana oil port, offshore oil port, the Loop, 13% of the nation's oil imports. Henry Hub and ERAF, driving the New York Mercantile Exchange price point for liquid natural gas. We have the largest of 9 liquid natural gas import terminals in Sabine. My point being is there is just a lot to protect that doesn't just benefit Louisiana, it benefits the nation. And you look at this slide and you look at all of these colors, and these represent national federal investment as well as a massive amount of local investment. I think Morganza to the Gulf, just in South Louisiana. So why don't we just highlight. Every color here represents a USACE project or study. So if you look at the purple on the left side of the screen, Southwest Coastal Project, 5.6 to 1 BCR. Then you move just to red, the South Central Coast Study. Then you move again to the east, you had Chapelai Backwater Study. Then you've got Morganza to the Gulf, which I know how familiar you guys are with that and the benefit that brings. Then up in green to the Upper Barataria Study. And then you have the HISDR system. That's the purple and the orange around New Orleans, $14.65 billion investment that we're doing the final touches on. Then you go down the Mississippi, the New Orleans to Venice Federal Levee Project. And then you just move north. You have the $720 million West Shore Lake Pontchartrain project that over the next 2 years will be awarding 14 contracts. You have the Amite River and Tributary Study. You have East Baton Rouge Flood Risk Management. That's a project underway. Comite River Diversion Project underway. St. Tammany Parish Study underway. My point being, there is a massive level of federal investment going on here in South Louisiana that when, we brief a lot of these projects one-on-one, but putting them all here together on the slide, and I know there's even projects that aren't on there. There's just a significant amount of investment. And I pass along to you folks on the screen, none of this could happen. The Corps cannot do this by itself. And it requires the close working relationship, the partnerships that we have with many of you. And I'm thankful that I can look at the screen and I can recognize a lot of folks and the personal relationship that if I don't have it with you, that you have it with the Mark Wingates and the other folks in the district that make it happen. And that is my hope, is that as you work with the Corps, if one of these projects is of particular interest to you, that you may not get the answer that you always want to hear, but you at least feel like you're treated professionally and that we listen and that we figure out ways that we can move forward. So really, this is New Orleans District in South Louisiana. And I skipped Grand Isle, which has been a big focus. We just finished the rock breakwaters And now we're moving to really the beach renourishment portion of that project. Okay, so I show this slide, and typically there's a collective groan because everybody's seen this before. Hey, 41% of the U.S. drains into the Mississippi River. Drains 31 states, 2 Canadian provinces, yada, yada, yada. Thank you, Colonel Murphy. We've all heard that before. But I briefed this slide to remind folks that all that water ends up down here. So when it's, heavy snow melts up north, or there's heavy rains in the Ohio River Valley, all of that, from all of this, ends up right here in the New Orleans district, and it becomes our problem and challenge, working in conjunction with many of you to manage it. So that brings us to the last year's High River event. And everybody that typically in the circles that I run knows that the 2018-2019 high water event was record-breaking. And for the New Orleans district, it was the longest flood fight in our history, 292 days, 9.5 months. We opened Bonnie Carey twice that year for a total of 124 days. Just a significant event for us. Well, fast forward into 2020, I think we had maybe 4.5 to 5 months off. I think it ended August 16th, 2019. And then it started up right after the new year. Like within the first week of the new year, we started seeing flood stages. And we went for 174 days, which all you need to do is look at the screen. Second longest flood fight for the second year in a row. So I'm not a weather forecaster. I'm not Nostradamus, but it does seem like it's too early to say whether it's a trend, but we've got 2 years of record-breaking flood seasons. And this year, we had to open Bonnie Carey. Just thankfully, it was for a short time. Thankfully, it was only 90 bays compared to over 200 bays last year. And that has just become a more and more challenging event. And I think for you folks, one of the things you care about is whenever we open Bonnie Carey, and especially after last year's twice in 1 year, this year marked the 5th time in 5 years that we've opened Bonnie Carey. And pretty sure most people know, but this is highly irregular. Bonnie Carey used to be open anywhere from once every 7 to 10 years, and here we are 5 times in the last 5 years, twice in 1 year, which means a lot of water is going into Lake Pontchartrain and the Gulf of Mississippi, and that has resulted in a lot of interest and calls for the Corps to operate the lower Mississippi River differently than we have. And personally, as commander, I know Mark Wingate receives this question a lot, is why don't you open Morganza more often? Why do we have to open Bonnie Carey the way we do? And this really brings me to the next slide, is the Mississippi River and tributary system. You can see, hey, how many miles of levees are on the Mississippi, but it's a system that involves the Atchafalaya Basin as well. And one of the key talking points in all this is the Corps of Engineers will abide by the law and operate the system as it's designed. And the system has functioned amazingly well. If you think about it, I think 11 significant floods since its creation. Last year, it passed the system, the Mississippi River and tributary system, passed more water than it has ever passed in its history. So, when it started being constructed post-1927, more water passed last year than the system has ever passed before. And it functioned. I will tell you that you watch the news from earlier this past year, the systems north of us, the levee systems, the Corps levee systems, they did not function like the MRT, and there was massive flooding. And we've actually hosted congressional delegations down here who have looked at the Mississippi River and tributary system and said, hey, we want that north of us. We want a system like they have there in Mississippi and Louisiana. But one of the talking points is we've operated the system and will continue to operate the system as designed. until we've studied the system enough to determine that it operates. And so I'll just highlight some things really quickly on this slide. So you can see there's a 70-30 split. And this is one of the things, especially east of the Mississippi, is a really important talking point to us. So when there's calls to, hey, don't open Bonnie Carey, send that water down, Morganza and the Atchafalaya, is I use a quote that as goes the Mississippi, so goes the Atchafalaya. So if the Mississippi is at flood stage, then the Atchafalaya is at flood stage, and often before the Mississippi. So Morgan City is above flood stage, and it's seeing its docks flooding when the Mississippi, before Bonnie Carey, we even see the triggers for Bonnie Carey. And so if you look on the screen in the middle of that green graphic, you see a 70-30 split. Some folks don't realize that the Atchafalaya and the Mississippi, essentially we combine the flows of the two, and then it's a 70-30 split. So the combined flows, 30% gets sent down the Atchafalaya, 70% stays in the Mississippi. So whether we're at flood stage or not, 30% of the water of that, the combined flow, is going down the Atchafalaya. So 30% as the flow increases the flow. So there's already a lot of water going down the Atchafalaya as the Mississippi rises. The second thing is, as we operate it as a system, and if you think about it, as the system fills. So the levee system through New Orleans can handle 1.25 million cubic feet per second. So as we start to see that, so below Bonnie Carey, the river going to hit 1.25 million and rising, that is the trigger to operate Bonnie Carey, to protect the levee system in New Orleans. And as the river continues to rise, so as more water comes in from up north, there's long periods of heavy rain, the river's continuing to rise, Bonnie Carey is operating. When we start to see 1.5 million below Morganza and rising, that's the trigger to open Morganza. So it's always a system, and it's as the flow increases, but it's not an either or, hey, why don't we operate Morganza instead of Bonnie Carey? But I pass along to you just for your awareness, the MRNT is not 100% complete. It's still under construction. It's one of the Corps' longest lasting civil works projects, but that 89% complete, a lot of the work left to be done is in the Atchafalaya Basin, and the federal levees in the Atchafalaya Basin. So as the water continues to rise, as we look at sending more water down the Atchafalaya, there is more risk in the Atchafalaya because the system is not as complete as the MRNT. Now the system has performed, but again, just for an optic, the system is not complete. We're about 89%, and this is just the annual challenge of getting budget. And the last thing I'll say on this slide is there's continual calls right now for how the Corps of Engineers operates the lower Mississippi River. 6 months ago, we were being sued 6 times over by the state of Mississippi, by numerous entities in Mississippi, and other members of the litigation for the operation of Bonnie Carey and the alleged impacts that it's had on the commercial fishing industry, on turtles, dolphins, and other things like that. So there's calls for, hey, the Corps needs to change how it operates. In the Word of 20 right now, there is draft language that directs the Corps, if it's signed and the bill is passed, it directs changes to the Corps to study how it operates lowering the Mississippi River. And there are just a lot of competing interests right now between navigation, with the state of Louisiana for coastal restoration, flood risk management, a lot of impacts. So the Corps, if it's authorized and funded, looks forward to undertaking what will be a massive study. Now I'll hit the just some quick project updates. And I'll say on Morganza to the Gulf, there's really good news here. we have seen more progress in the last 12 months in this project, I think, than it's seen in a lot of time. I mean, this is really how I know Mitch and Reggie and the folks that I see on the camera right now is a lot of engagement by the stakeholder. And this is something to me that is one of our talking points within the Corps is the massive amount of local, parish, state, levy district investment. I think it's $1 billion right now to get you where you're at. And the key talking point to me is following Rita in 2005, 11,000 homes flooded, and the massive investment by the state and the locals, and then Barry last summer, less than 11 homes flooded. Right now, like I said, we're in a better spot than we've ever been. We worked last year hard on a new and innovative approach. We call it the ACAR. That was approved by headquarters. And what that did was make the project much more budgetable. It was an unbudgetable $10.3 billion. Study looked hard at it and has brought it back down to just over $3 billion, which OMB, it certainly has administration support right now. There's a lot of support for this project regionally. I know General Toy briefed him many times, and we were able to reprogram $1.25 million for the completion of some initial design work. And right now, we're cautiously optimistic that this will continue to make progress. I'm sure there'll be some questions at the end on this one, but to me, this is a good news story. It has momentum, and it did, but it's going to take some more work because to date, no federal funding, construction funding. All right, so with the Home and Navigation Canal, this is good news as well. David Rabelais, I hope you're on the line. It's been a while since we've gotten a phone call, but this was good. This is a good news story because in the FY20 budget, very generous for HNC. I had $1 million in the president's budget. We got $4 million in the work plan, so $5 million. And what that means is dredging in the bay and the inland reaches can reach the project depth of 15 feet in the inland and 18 feet in the bay. And then we're looking at next year for the 21 president's budget of $2.75 million, which is another good news story. And then when you put that, combine that with whatever we get in the work plan, which we just don't know yet, this is good news for HNC. I would tell you the challenge will be much like in many other areas of our dredging program. Having the money doesn't get us across the goal line. It's having the money and having the dredge available. The dredge is available to be able to do this. There is a massive demand we're seeing nationally on the hopper and cutter head dredge fleet. And, you know, Southwest Pass gets priority, but even in Southwest Pass, we're having challenges because we're now competing. The state, I know, has some coastal restoration projects, so there's a big demand right now in the industry for cutter head and hopper dredges. So moving on to Port Fourchon, this is not as good a news a story. This is a little bit tougher, and this goes back to the PBUD, the FY20 PBUD. There's just not that much money to really be able to do much. On the positive side of this, it was last dredged in March of 2019, and from what I'm tracking from earlier this year, the channel is still at project depth. I know we did sign an agreement to assume maintenance of an additional mile of dredging in the port complex just in March of 2018, and so now the district will be developing budget requests for this part of the dredging under our O&M account. And last thing I'll say with Port Fourchon is I know the port had submitted a Section 203 request for deepening the port from 15 to 20 feet, and that has made some great progress in the last 6 months. It's gone from here to our regional headquarters, the MVD, to the Corps headquarters, then it went to the ASA's office. The ASA office approved it and pushed it to OMB. OMB just recently approved it, and finally it's now with Congress as of the 15th of July. So that one, a lot of progress over the last few months. And then with Southwest Coastal, what I'll tell you with several of these projects is the Corps has taken a new approach to flood risk management and looking at really structural solutions, levees, flood walls, as well as non-structural solutions, which is really what you see here. It doesn't apply to every area, but even with projects like Morganza to the Gulf and others, you really need a mix of structural and non-structural solutions to provide the risk reduction that you're looking for. And this one has a phenomenal benefit to cost ratio of 5.8 to 1. And again, it just it represents another tool in our toolbox. And you can see the projects will elevate or provide localized flood proofing to approximately 3,400 homes, 342 commercial or public residences, and 157 warehouses. And to me, that's great. That's what those blue and pink dots represent, is the risk reduction for structures in this study area. And we just received almost $1 million, $820,000 in the 2018 work plan, and we've initiated the design for a lot of these features. I mentioned this in the original slide for what we have going on, but you can see the 5 projects that we have going on, and these are fully underway. And if folks were looking for opportunities to do business with the Corps, these are the ones that I would immediately point you to. Cummy Diversion, $340 million. West Shore Lake Pontchartrain, $760 million. Now that one, 14 contracts estimated to be let in the next 2 years on this. And you East Baton Rouge, Carrollton Flood Wall right here at my district headquarters. And then Grand Isle, nearing completion there with we just completed the first half of the project. But because of that supplemental funding that I was telling you about, all 5 fully funded, all underway, a lot of incredible opportunity, and when all is said and done, will result in significant flood risk management, risk reduction for these areas. We have Upper Barataria. So things are looking promising in this study. It's on track. Currently, the tentatively selected plan, and that's a big T in tentatively, is to construct a 7.5-foot levee alignment from Hisders on the west bank to the Lafourche Ridge, and you can see the dotted red line on the screen. And one of the things we're working especially closely on this project is with FEMA to ensure that the study recommends a 100-year level of risk reduction. And so far right now, things are looking promising with FEMA, where we might be able to achieve really what translates into preferred insurance premiums for those who live within the project's protection. And then South Central Coast, just again, very similar to what I just briefed, tentatively selected plan here on this one, flood proofing for almost 3,500 structures, an estimated $1.4 billion investment, with annual net benefit of almost $21 million. So a lot of significant work. I'm really excited about this. So I'll close with saying just a heads up, a couple points of interest with what's going on in the Corps. So you are seeing significant transition in the Corps right now. 9 general officers will have changed out this summer. Most of them have already occurred. And a lot of time they just went from division to division. And that really all started with the Chief of Engineers, who's been the chief for the last 4 years. Many of you have likely seen him on the news. It's Lieutenant General Todd Semonite. He was all over the news, did a great job on the COVID-19 for the Corps response. He will finish his 4-year tenure and retire this summer, and he'll be replaced by General Spellman. And that's a good transition for us because General Spellman is currently the Director of Civil Works, and he's tracking projects like Morganza to the Gulf. He's certainly tracking dredging. Every time I go to D.C., I get about 30 minutes with him, and I always have a list of things like, hey, sir, I want to update you on this, this, and this. The last time I was in D.C., we spent the entire 30 minutes talking about dredging. So he is a guy that's coming into the position who understands a lot. He understands a lot of what's going on here in South Louisiana. So I think that's a good thing for all of us. On the bottom left of the screen, you see Major General Toy. many of you just started to get to know him, but he recently changed command. The Army is sending him to South Korea to be the Chief of Staff for the UN command there. And he was replaced by Major General Diana Holland. And General Holland is coming to us from the South Atlantic Division. So she comes to us with Civil Works experience. She certainly comes to us with a lot of emergency management experience. In her 3 years at South Atlantic Division, every year was a busy hurricane year for that. So she understands when projects like Morganza or the Gulf talk storm surge and the challenge of that, she brings us in. She really is, I would say, a plug on the diversity side of the house. With everything going on in the nation, she is the first female commanding general in the Mississippi Valley Division. She's, broken glass ceilings a lot. She was the first female commandant, the U.S. Military Academy at West Point. She was the first assistant division commander in an infantry division, which is unheard of. So she is coming here. I'm not just saying this because she's my boss, but very much enjoyed working with her. And I would tell you, for those of you who do engage with her, the Reggies, the Mitches, and the other folks on the line, I think you will find her just as friendly as you found General Kaiser and General Toy. I think she will be a good news. And then on the right side of the screen, very interesting for many of you, you see on the left in the old Army camouflage uniform, Colonel Al Lee, district commander here in New Orleans from 2007 to 2010, right post Katrina, hot and heavy. He is now the senior civilian for all of Civil Works in the Corps of Engineers. Now, what does that mean to you? That means that for those of you who are familiar working with Mr. Dalton, this is the new Mr. Dalton. And so, again, every time I go to D.C., Mark and I go to D.C., we always stop by the Corps headquarters to kiss the ring, if you will, and brief them on projects and get updates on things. Mr. Lee is one of the guys we always brief. And I can tell you the briefings go a little bit easier in the sense that he is very, very familiar because of his 3 years here in New Orleans with our projects. So I won't say an advocate. He really is kind of an advocate. He understands Morganza to the Gulf. He understands the dredging challenges, not just in Southwest Pass, but with our low-use channels like HNC. He gets a lot of this. So I think that as you go to D.C., and as the both of you have time, he might be worth your engagement. The final thing I'll close with is we spoke at the beginning about regulatory. And I know just from having worked with some of the folks on the line very recently on permits, this is such a hot issue for me as commander that I have hired somebody to work in the front office to help Mark and I with permits. And one of the things I would pass along is a way you can help. So all these colored charts, all these bars are essentially the regulatory workload through all the districts in the Corps of Engineers, so almost 43, that have a regulatory program. You can see the 3 largest are Jacksonville District in Florida, the New York District, obviously in New York, and the New Orleans District. And one of the things that I pass along to you is that the Civil Works regulatory budget, it is its own line of funding. It's not O&M funding. It's not any other kind of funding. It is its own coded funding. As the budget has been flatlined since 2014, so for the last 6 years. And what does that mean to you? What that means is in South Louisiana, where the regulatory work is more complex because there's so much that involves federal waterways and impacts to federal projects. I mean, you saw how much is going on here in South Louisiana. There is a massive workload in New Orleans. And what a flatline budget means is it makes it very difficult to hire up additional regulators to be able to do this. So this is not complaining. This is the environment. What I pass along to you, for those of you who engage congressional members, to help process regulatory permits and regulatory actions in a more timely manner, We need more people, and we can't do that without a bigger budget. So I think you will continue to see challenges in the New Orleans district and the Jacksonville district and across the Corps, that as long as the Corps Civil Works regulatory budget stays flatlined, these problems will maintain. And I'll work with, and hopefully, I'm looking at Mitch and Reggie. We'll work with you as much as possible. Mark and I are always trying to find a way to yes where we can within the law and regulations. But this is just one thing I passed along to you, that not as a complaint, but as you engage, this is one thing that the Corps can get better at and wants to get better at. But again, this is one of those things that having additional funding, just like additional funding helps projects, additional funding helps the Corps' regulatory program. So that's all I had for you this morning. Hopefully that wasn't too much or at too high a level, but I'm certainly standing by for questions. And I really want to say thanks for letting me speak. Thank you, Mitch, for the invitation. And hopefully you found this valuable.
Again, if there are any questions, please use the chat feature at the bottom of the screen. Just hover over that chat icon and type a question in and it'll pop up.
Yeah. I'll take advantage of my bully pulpit that I have here. Colonel, thank you very much for coming to speak to us. I don't know how different New Orleans is compared to Nashville, and in terms of your service, I know the budgets were different and some of the problems are probably the same, but one thing that's unique about here is how engaged the people are and really know what's going on and are tied to these projects and have tracked them for so long. It is really great news to hear Colonel Lee being in the position he's in, as we've known him very well over the years. We even had a few chances with Mr. Clifford Smith to go hunting with Colonel Lee. So we look forward to talking to him while we're up there. I did have a couple of questions, and I think Reggie has a comment. In terms of the river, one thing that I've noticed here, really since the river started dropping this year, is taking a look at the gauges at all of our floodgates that are located on the bayous here in Terrebonne, way south of both the intercoastal and far removed from the Atchafalaya. But when that river drops, the average water level at each one of those structures drops. In this case, almost a foot this year when that river began to fall. And that's something that I've tried to relay to the public is, we've got an average water condition around here that's much higher than what we've seen, for decades, but especially in the last few years. So my question is, I know you mentioned in where there's a big giant study going on, but is there any current studies going on about the efficiency of the river? And I'm not talking about down here, I'm talking about up north. What is causing, other than rainfall, is there something else causing these elevated stages, everywhere up and down the river? Because it's not just here. All of those records occurred at different places along the river for the last several years. So that's one question I had.
So I'll answer. I'm not familiar with anything north of here. I've got Duran here with me. I know we have the Omar. It's not an official study, but it's going on, and it's really looking at the Old River complex and a little bit south of it. But north of it, I'm not tracking anything as a system. Certainly not that the Corps is doing. Are you saying like an Ohio River system type study or Arkansas study?
Anything like that.
Yeah, hey Mitch, this is Duran. Following 2011, we did do a comprehensive evaluation of the flow line, just to reaffirm that the underlying principles and assumptions that we made for the current flow line that we're using is still valid. So we did do kind of an assessment just to look at the flow line to make certain everything was still current. In terms of doing detailed studies for like the Ohio River Basin, et cetera, I'm not tracking anything of that nature. But we did do an assessment back in following the 2011 event to just confirm that the flow line information was correct or accurate. I think a large part of what we're seeing is just really a change in climatology across the area. I think that's one of the biggest driving factors for the epic river stages that we're seeing. If you go back to last year, it was one of the wettest years on record. So while there are some changes in the river system over time, I just really think a large portion of this is driven by climate change.
Yeah, I appreciate that. The current study that you said was in Word, I mean, I guess that is a more comprehensive approach to the entire river.
Yeah.
I would say to the lower Mississippi River.
Okay. All right, thank you.
We do
Reggie.
we do have a question or a comment that came through on chat, and it's actually from our immediate past president of SCIA, Chet Chasson from Port Fourchon. Chet, I just unmuted you so that you can go through with that.
Great. Thank you, Colonel. I know I put it through chat like Christy said, but just wanted to mention, you didn't mention that our 203 report was looking at that we had in Port Fourchon authorized to, we were minus 15, I think, going to minus 20. I just wanted to clarify that we're actually authorized to minus 24, and the 203 study allows us to go to minus 30 in Bellepasse, Bayou Lafourche, and into our northern expansion in the port. And fortunately enough, it was passed through the order bill that was passed the House last week. So hopefully it stays in there on the Senate side, and we can continue to move forward. And I think ultimately the best part of it is that we can utilize that material to then do some things beneficially with marsh creation and that sort of thing to kind of solve two problems with one solution of dredging. So we're excited about that fact, and hopefully can move something forward late next year in terms of at least putting forth our match towards the dredging, the new dredging of the project. So we're excited about that front, and maybe get us towards the future in a couple of years to maybe going to 50 feet. But we'll deal with that later. Now is minus 30, and we'll move that forward. I also wanted to tell you thank you. You mentioned some dredging, that we did have really a lack of dredging funds for this cycle for O&M, but we were fortunate enough to get some supplemental funding a couple of years ago, and some completed dredging. About 1 million cubic yards came out, about a $7 million project, as well as about a $3 million jetty repair project through that same supplemental. So we did have some good work done last year and kind of completed in early 2019. So hopefully in the next cycle, in the 2021 cycle, we could potentially get some more funding for dredging. That's kind of where my mind's at, and hopefully the Corps' mind is going to be there as well. So I want to thank you for that, and look forward to continuing to move forward.
I appreciate that, and thanks for the update.
I do think we're running out of time. So I do have a comment from Reggie, who's sitting next to me, but I think we're going to be running pretty close on time here right now.
So, Colonel, I just want to thank you and the Corps. You are correct. There is more engagement now on Morganza to the Gulf than we have ever seen. I've been dealing with this since the early 90s. And it seems that the district division and headquarters is all engaged, and so is our congressional delegation. I think in the next year or so, we will finally get to the new start construction phase, which is great. And also thank you for acknowledging and having the Houma Navigational Canal Lock Complex. The state issued its permit on it last week, and I understand the Corps is working on a draft permit and should be out in the next few weeks. So this will be the largest single public works contract ever to be done in this part of the state. Total close to $400 million along the Morganza alignment. Be a huge environmental benefit for freshwater, as well as navigation and flood control. So thank y'all so much for working with us. I think the icing on the cake is Mr. Al Lee being in headquarters now, because he's certainly familiar with us.
Thank you.
Chrissy, I don't know if we have any other questions or,
No, we have no more questions on chat. Colonel Murphy, thank you so much for your time. Mitch, thank you for being the moderator. Deanna, thank you for hosting this through Entergy. And for all of those still watching, if you would like to watch this again or share it with anyone, we will be posting this on the SCIA website, sciaonline.net. And keep a lookout on your email for future webinars and other notices. Thank you so much for joining us.
thank you, Colonel.
Thank you.